1990, the steel industry in the U.S. has reduced its CO2 footprint by 29%. We are, without qualification, the most CO2 and energy or CO2 efficient steel industry in the world when you look at the entirety of the U.S. industry. We're about 60% based on the electric arc furnace method making of steel, which is a recycling focused, primarily recycling focused technology, and about 40 to 45% integrated method. That balance of recycling and highly efficient manufacturing operations makes us an example and a technology that shows that we can be responsible, and we are driven, in fact, the entire business model for this industry is in many ways driven by the cost of energy and the trade-offs in terms of different energy inputs. So we would start with the first question of, and I've been asked to talk today about the relationship between a global steel sector approach and a U.S. cap and trade system. And because I work legislation, I can tell you what I'd prefer to start with is that the right question? I mean, should we be trying to make a cap and trade system that allows us to somehow go forward and keep industries that we think have some national strategic value? Or should we be instead asking the question about what is the most efficient way to reduce global CO2 emissions and address the problem that we have identified that needs to be addressed? Can you impose a cost and get the desired public policy outcome? Well, the problem is you can impose a cost and it will drive a behavior. That's absolutely guaranteed. You impose a cost in the U.S., you will drive a behavior. The question is it going to drive the right behavior? The indications are from the European cap and trade system is you better be careful if you're thinking that your tool is a cap and trade system that you don't incentivize people to just move offshore, because there will always be a regime somewhere that will invite capital and jobs to come and land on their shores, and they will happily export. I think this is an issue that it is coming into realization that dealing with this question about energy intensive industries on a global basis is recognized around the world as something that is a problem, and it's being lived with today in Europe as European companies are struggling under the various phases of the European emissions trading system. So we're enough on that. We're engaged, and we intend to continue pursuing in a parallel track, you know, this notion of a global agreement that will then guide all the national governments in their own respective ways. Steel and carbon go together. Under known technology, steel cannot be made without emitting CO2. It's how iron ore or iron oxide is reduced. When you reduce iron oxide, CO2 is released out the top, and pure iron is released out the bottom. That's the simplest explanation you'll ever hear of it. That occurs in a blast furnace, and until technology, whether it's, you know, whatever the magic of technology is going to be, it's going to have to solve that fundamental law of chemistry and known technology before we get around that. So the first amendment we asked for and believe is necessary is a recognition that as a process emission, it should be exempted from the cap and trade requirements, because to impose a cost on it is nothing more than a punitive tax. How do you do a turnover, an effective, cost-effective capital stock turnover for an industry, for any industry? In the steel industry, about 80% of our costs are fixed. And it's all because it's a highly capital-intensive industry that capital stock, and one of the reasons that no steel mill in the world looks like another, is it's very expensive to turn that capital stock over. And the way the depreciation rules work in the U.S. is quite different and must be examined with an eye towards international integration. The way the tax laws, the way the cost of capital, all of those are going to be considerations that really need to be looked at some distant point in the future when the technology is even there. But today the technology doesn't exist. So until it does, there needs to be a system that holds harmless these energy intensive industries.